I'm such a diva.
Need this?
No, because I gotta find enough light to see this.
Oh, there's a light here, actually.
That's alright, I think I got it. Hey, I was hiding behind that.
Okay.
Alright, this is by James Henry Taylor. It's from his collection called Honeysuckle and Other Stories, which was published by Cave Hollow Press right here in town. And the particular story is called Whisper. Sarah Feldman was racing full tilt down the long dimension of the recess yard with a couple of boys following close behind. I recognized Sarah because she lived in the house near the end of our street. Often I'd see her skipping rope on the sidewalk, and more than once she tried to enlist me to be the daddy. The pair that dogged her were familiar too, although I didn't really know them. They were stranger kids from a neighborhood half a mile distant. We were all about 6 years old, and, acquaintance or no, it was obvious what was happening. The boys were chasing Sarah for the sake of chasing her, and she, laughingly, ran away for the sake of running away. A little slope angled up from the blacktop behind our school, a swath of dry dirt with scattered clumps of grass. I was standing at its crest, so I had an unobstructed view of everything that happened. When Sarah reached the imaginary line that separated our playground from the parking lot, she did a quick about-face, dodged her pursuers, and dashed back in the other direction. The boys collided in the confusion, but quickly got themselves untangled and took off after her again. Meanwhile, 3 new players, 2 young ladies and another young gentleman, entered into the game. Sarah, of course, couldn't have been happier, sailing along the pavement in the finest of feminine style, her dark braids trailing out behind her and her frilly dress flapping in the breeze she made. At that moment, the world was her private property, to lead by the nose however she pleased. So when she reached the point where she'd started from, she spun around again and with a feint to the left and a shrieking giggle, eluded the knot of children desperately trying to grab her. Sarah kept leading the pack one way, then the other. On her 4th lap up the play yard, I trotted down the hill to join the growing stampede. By that time, at least 30 girls and boys had committed themselves to catching her. I was quickly engulfed in the grinning and the shouting, the flash of excited eyes, and the hectic tramp of hard-soled shoes. Only Sarah's head and shoulders were visible from where I ran, and those only partly. And suddenly, without any warning, she disappeared altogether. The front line jerked to a halt, bringing the rest of us up short. After an awkward pause, the herd milled uneasily forward, most of us having no idea why we'd stopped. All at once, the children in front of me parted like an opening door. Sarah lay unmoving on the ground, her profile gracing a manhole cover as though she were a queen on an ancient coin. Her legs bent at the knees in arrested flight, her arms reached to embrace something just a bit beyond their range. The left braid had wrapped itself around her neck, and the right curled up from under her ear. There wasn't a scratch or a skinned elbow, nor any blood at all, at least none that anyone could see. Without exactly realizing how, several of us found ourselves standing right beside her. No one spoke, and nothing moved, except when a puff of air flicked at the hem of her school dress, or birds from somewhere called back and forth. We studied Sarah's sleeping face and waited. Lying hard beneath her cheek, the iron manhole cover shone a dull orange. The outlines of its rusted markings, some in high relief, some in low, were softened by the morning light. I had tried several times before to fathom those inscriptions, and had thought I'd finally figured them out. But suddenly they'd changed, the curved slots ranging in circles around Sarah's head, the lines radiating from her quieted face, the letters and arcane signs that seemed to flow from her open mouth now whispered another, more secret message. Miss Carmody approached through the waist-high throng, gently shoving children aside as she went. She stopped at Sarah's side, stood for a moment with her hand across her mouth, and then forced her way back to the first graders' entrance. Soon, several teachers began herding us back into the building. In the classroom, I took my usual seat by the windows. As I slipped behind my desk, a silent ambulance pulled up on the other side of the glass. 2 men in white uniforms moved quickly yet unhurriedly, placing Sarah on a stretcher and strapping her down. They were hoisting her into the vehicle when the Venetian blinds, with an anxious clatter, were lowered between us and the scene outside. Our teacher, Miss Delacroix, was still clutching the blind cord in her right hand as she spread two slats apart and peered through the daylight space. For the rest of us, there was only a brief silence, followed by the slamming of doors and the grinding of gears. Then we heard the ambulance roll away. Shortly after, a siren began to cry. Miss Delacroix returned to her desk and sagged into her chair. She stared a while at the desktop, toying with a piece of string. She'd used that piece of string that very morning to illustrate a tale of three clever kittens who always knew exactly what to do. At last she rose and started handing out large sheets of yellow paper, instructing us to take out our pencils and copy the alphabet twice, first in capitals and then in smalls.